join us yet again. My name is Dominic. I will be coordinating the webinar for us today. Just some basic rules so that we optimize on the little time that we have. If you have any questions, kindly place them in the chat box. They will be addressed at the tail end of the webinar. We are going to have a Q&A session at the tail end of the webinar. Also to remind us that this is equally a networking session for us, all of us. And so we would like to know who you are, where you're joining us from, and where you work. That will be very much important. If you like also to share an email here and there, we'd like to encourage you as well, because this is also a networking session for all of us. Asanteni sana for finding time. If you're continuously joining us for these webinars, asante sana for the support. We don't take it for granted. If this is your first time joining us for this webinar, asante sana. We have these webinars each and every month. Be on the lookout, and if we have your email, we will be sending the updates as we plan for the next webinar. Anyway, I'm going to leave the mic now with Judy, who is the host for the webinar, to introduce us to the co-host. Judy.
Hi, Dominic, thank you. I was trying to multitask. I was trying to do many things at the same time. But thanks for the intro, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Sorry, my slides are moving faster than I want them to move. Yeah, but thank you for joining us for webinar 3 of 2025, as Dominic has already mentioned. This is part of our monthly webinar series where we come together to discuss and share and listen. Most of the time, we are co-hosting with experts or professionals in the industry, real practitioner stories. This is what this webinar series is all about. We hear from practitioners in all different spheres of sustainable tourism. In the coming webinar, we probably will be talking about how to deal with social justice issues in the workplace and the measurements for the same. And we'll be having a practitioner who has dealt with this and will share with us what their views are. So don't miss. Our topics are extremely diverse to enable us cover everything that we can around the subjects of sustainable development of tourism. Today, my co-host is Joanne Dungu. Joanne is from, oops, my slides are moving too fast. Joanne is the residence manager at Leopard Beach Resort in South Coast, Kenya. Most of you know it as Diani. That is the popular name for it, but it is in Kenya's political jurisdiction. It is in Kwale County, one of the 5 counties that make up the coastal tourism in Kenya. So when we talk about coastal tourism in Kenya, we are talking about Kwale County, where you have Diani and where Joanne will be joining us from. We have Mombasa County, we have Lamu County, we have Taita Taveta County, we have Tana River County, and we have Kilifi County. These are actually considered the coastal counties of Kenya, and they have in one shape or another some form of coastal tourism. They might not all have marine tourism, but they all have a form of coastal tourism. So Joanne has got more than close to 15 years experience now working in the coastal areas of Kenya, and she has seen the transition in particularly in consumer trends, but in all other trends that she's going to share with us today. That in the last decade, coastal tourism in Kenya has changed significantly. And we're going to listen to Joanne as she shares with us what does this change look like? What does it mean for the future of tourism in this area? And for tour operators who are here, I think it is a great opportunity to see how we repackage the coastal tourism and also how those who are already providing services on the ground, how they are going to revisit the consumption of the coastal tourism product, because I anticipate from what Joanne will share with us that we will see some changes, that changes have happened. Now, there are these terms that are used interchangeably when we talk about tourism and the coastal areas. There is coastal and marine tourism, right? So sometimes they're used to mean the same thing. You find that it's been written in documentation, in policy. I think even in Kenya, we have not distinguished between coastal and marine tourism. We actually talk about beach tourism instead. Whereas beach is just one of the products that we have in coastal tourism. But if you look at the policies, they will probably be talking and focusing and emphasizing on the beach. And I think for most of the countries in the Western Indian Ocean states, yeah, the belt where we find Kenya's coast, Mozambique's coast, Seychelles, where we find Madagascar, where we find a bit of Tanzania, Zanzibar, going all the way, there is always a focus on beach and not looking at policies in terms of coastal and marine tourism. And today we are talking more of an inclusive way of referring to these two, right? When we now look at these two and we combine them, we end up with what we call blue tourism. For those of you who have been following me on LinkedIn and other platforms and are thinking, why is the emphasis? Why do I talk more today than talking about coastal or marine tourism? It's because a combination of them forms what we call blue tourism. And we should be more holistic in our approach today, so that even when we are looking at the economic value of blue tourism, we are not separating coastal and marine. So today we have learned that coastal tourism, together, the two of them, right? When we look at the two of them, they account for 93% of ocean's economy, 4% contribution to GDP, with most other subsectors contributing way less than 1%. Yeah. But what I wanted to bring out here is that coastal and marine tourism combined, which is blue equals blue tourism, is still regarded as the fastest growing areas of contemporary tourism. Even today, with its challenges, with the challenges of coastal tourism, when we combine tourism in Africa or tourism in the Western Indian Ocean, we find that coastal tourism contributes way more than any other form of tourism for the continent. So it is significant, even where it has been neglected and no attention has been paid to it, or where it has been affected by wars and conflict, or where it has been affected by terrorism and other things, like it has been the case of Kenya. And I think Joanne will tell us more about that. Coastal tourism still contributes much more than any other form of tourism, not just in the continent, but actually globally. So it is a very, very significant segment of tourism. So now let's distinguish them. I started by saying coastal and marine, and just wanted to clarify that they are different. So the coastal tourism, when we talk about coastal tourism, we isolate it and are just talking specifically about land-based tourism activities taking place on the coast, including their respective services. And these respective services include the hotels, yeah? The hotels and the beach and everything that you consume that is offered by this infrastructure along the coastal area is what coastal tourism is. So it is mostly land-based tourism. And that's why it is dominated by hotels on the beach, because it is a form of land-based tourism happening on the beach and offering the experiences and services that are proximate or with proximity to the sea as a condition. So in coastal tourism, proximity to the sea is what distinguishes it. It does not really necessarily include what happens in the sea, but it is proximity to the sea. Okay? Then we have marine tourism. Marine tourism refers to sea-based activities. Now we are not proximity to the sea. We are now talking about sea-based activities. And I hope that for those who did not have the clarity of marine and coastal tourism, this clears what we are talking about when we talk about coastal and marine tourism. So it is about those activities that are now sea-based. So when you talk about your boating, your yachting, your cruising, all the deep sea fishing, all those things that are now sea-based activities, this is what is called marine activities. But these marine activities have some land-based services and infrastructure. So we might need a landing bay, we might need a fish landing bay, we might need a beach to take off for our yachting, we might need a marina, we might need all this wide range of activities, that are related to deep sea activities, what is called marine tourism. Right? So I mentioned earlier on that now when you combine coastal tourism and marine tourism, you have what we call blue tourism. So some facts about coastal and marine tourism in Kenya, as Joanne comes on to talk to us. For a long time, and this is what you find traditionally in literature, that it is dominated by mass tourism. Maybe Joanne is going to tell us this morning whether that is still the case, that it is still dominated by mass tourism involving the movement of large numbers of international tourists to often all-inclusive enclave beach resorts. I don't think that is a very good description, but this is this information I picked from Nairobi Convention, a convention that discusses matters around the sea and the ocean. And this is what it described coastal and marine tourism in Kenya to be. So there is those keywords. It's mass tourism. It involves this massive movement of large numbers from international tourists, right, to often all-inclusive enclave beach resorts. Yeah. And what is the negative effect of that? The negative effect of that is that this form of tourism traditionally, and now I'm not talking the last 10 years or 15, because Joanne is going to take us through what has changed, but traditionally, this form of tourism excluded local entrepreneurs from the tourism value chain and the benefits that come from that value chain. Tyson, will you please mute yourself? Okay, so before I welcome Joanne, I wanted to draw our attention to this report on sustainable blue tourism in the Western Indian Ocean, trends, challenges, and key pathways. I would anybody who is interested in blue tourism and understanding tourism in the seas and the oceans in a deeper way, and what the current situation is. I think this is one of the most current reports, and I'm sharing it because as STTA, I was involved in the research and the production of this Blue Tourism Report in 2024. So it is a very, very current report, and I would encourage us to go and read this report. We will learn more about tourism in the Western Indian Ocean states, which includes our own coastal areas in Kenya. But more critically, it has identified at least 5 pathways for advancing sustainable blue tourism. And this could be key directions that policymakers in blue tourism should be looking at. And also, as I invite Joanne, I would like to encourage us to start talking more about blue tourism so that we talk about inclusion of both sea-based and land-based activities in combination. And for policymakers who are here, that we begin to measure the value, the economic value of blue tourism by combining both and not just looking at coastal tourism and ignoring marine tourism and the value that it brings. And then we will begin to see that it is a very, very important and significant sector that needs a lot of attention. Now, with that introduction, I would like now to invite Joanne to take us through the changing trends so that we can see what is different, what is new, and how it relates to the historical perspectives of coastal tourism. Joanne, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Judy. Good morning, everyone. Greetings, very warm greetings from Africa's leading beach destination, 2024, Diani Beach. They say that we who are based here in Diani are very proud of our destination and we always identify with it. And I think for us, that comes from a place where we have seen what it means to introduce a destination before we even introduce our individual capacities in the different spaces we are part of. So as Judy had mentioned, my name is Joan Dungu. I am currently the residencies manager at a beautiful five-star beach resort in Diani called Leopard Beach Resort and Spa. And thank you, Judy, for allowing me to be part of this particular engagement. It is true that we have seen quite a shift in the way we do business here in the Kenyan coast when it comes to the tourist. And this, in many ways, has informed the way we do business, the way we take care of our environment, and even the way we train the teams that support us in ensuring that our guests have some memorable experiences. Now, I'll just quickly share my presentation. Allow me to do that. And as I share my presentation, I would want to just briefly mention that as I was putting this together, my assumption was this particular platform is an international platform. We would not want to assume that everybody who will join us today is familiar with the Kenyan coast. So as you'll see, I've done a small introduction about what the Kenyan coast comprises of, what are our products currently, or rather what have been our traditional products, and what has changed from since when we started doing business, tourism business for that matter, to date. So basically, for those who've not had a chance to visit the Kenyan coast, we are located on the southern part of Kenya, as Judy introduced. We are made up of 5 counties, Taita Taveta, and that's the only county that is not part of the coastline. We have Lamu, Kilifi, Mombasa, and Kwale counties. The Kenyan coast boasts of about 600 kilometers of wide, pristine beach, so a beautiful coastline is about 600 kilometers. The Kenyan coast is popularly known for destinations such as Shela, Manda Bay, Malindi, Watamu, Mombasa, and Diani Beach. These are I think the destinations that are globally identifiable with the Kenyan coast. So basically, a small history pre and post independence of the Kenyan coast is the Kenyan coast was considered, or rather is still considered, as the breadbasket of tourism in Kenya, and it accounts for about 65% of the total tourists who come to Kenya. This as at the year 2023, as per the Tourism TRI report on the industry. Coastal tourism as Judy has defined, formed the backbone of our industry back in the 80s. And this comparatively with wildlife tourism or safari tourism. So those are the two main products that Kenya as a destination was known for globally. And currently within the Kenyan coast, coastal tourism accounts for about 70% of household earnings. And the 30%, someone would ask, so what happens to the 30? So the 30 is basically comes from an element of port. Mombasa is actually still, Mombasa as a county is a tourism destination, but it is also a port city. So the 30% has been accounted for to support households from port business. Our key source markets traditionally from the to the Kenyan coast have been the European countries, and this was primarily facilitated by charter flights that would fly directly from those countries or cities within those countries to directly to Mombasa here through Mombasa Airport. So what is our product profile here in the Kenyan coast? What are we known for? We are known for amazing beaches. We are known for cultural experiences. The Kenyan coast is very rich in culture. And I must say, and someone would argue, but I feel like the Kenyan coast has been very, very intentional in retaining uh, culture as compared to other parts of the country. When you look at the cultural product, and this is all the way from Taita Taveta down to Gasi, Vanga here in Kwale County, where we have uh, a lot of rich culture from the Shirazi here in Vanga and Funzi Island all the way up to Taita Taveta. The Kenyan coast is also known for water sports. We've been identified as a key water sport destination. And this has also been confirmed by several events and festivals that are water sport related that are usually uh, hosted here on an annual basis. The Kenyan coast is also known for a safari product, and this is domiciled in Taita Taveta County, where we have the famous Savo East and Savo West Park, known for a lot of history, culture, and the famous elephants. So basically, what we are saying is the Kenyan coast can give you both a coastal and marine experience combined with safari. Um, the Kenyan coast also boasts of very scenic, rich, raw, authentic islands such as Funzi, Pate, and Kiwayu. And this make up for great exploration, um, especially for those who want to just get away from the confines of the modern world. Bird watching is a product that has progressively picked up, and this has been seen primarily in the islands, as well as selected national parks and reserves based here in the Kenyan coast. Of course, our famous dolphins, the marine life here in the Kenyan coast has made the destination a hub for deep sea divers. A lot of research happens here because of the beautiful coral that the Kenyan coast has is known to have. Now, that in very brief is what basically is associated with the Kenyan coast. And I'm sure for the tour operators who are here, I'm sure if they were to give us an example of an itinerary they have designed for the Kenyan coast, it would incorporate two or more of the products that I've just listed. Now, progressively over the years, we have seen a shift in the way coastal tourism has been consumed. And this is actually from a tourist perspective. We have seen a progressive change in from the traditional markets that used to service, or rather that used to experience coastal tourism. We have seen how influences of technology have affected the way we do business. So my next segment basically will just take us through a few pointers that have are causing a shift in the way we do business here in the Kenyan coast. And this is very important because then it informs a lot of decisions by all the stakeholders who are involved in the tourism circuit or ecosystem here in the Kenyan coast. And not only those who are domiciled here, but basically anyone who is looking to do business or to package the Kenyan coast. Some of these pointers are very, very critical, and they inform some critical decisions in the way we run our businesses. Now, one of the things that has contributed to this shift, and it's something that we have seen and we are currently experiencing, is we've seen a gradual increase in MICE tourism compared to the traditional leisure tourism. So the Kenyan coast was basically known, or rather, leisure tourism accounted for about 80% of the business here in the Kenyan coast. Now we have over time seen a gradual shift from leisure tourism to MICE tourism. And for those who may not be familiar with the term MICE, MICE here means meetings, incentives, conventions, and events. And we have seen almost a double-digit changeover after COVID. Where now we are almost at a 50-50% proportion if you look at MICE compared to leisure tourism here in the Kenyan coast. This has been evidenced by even additional investments in the MICE sector, where investors have come in to meet this demand for the growing MICE market. Now, is this a good thing for the Kenyan coast? I feel this demand was necessitated, especially post-COVID, in order for businesses to stay afloat and to be sustainable, for lack of a better word. Given that most of the activities that fall within the MICE element are known as essential travel, that really gathered momentum, especially after COVID. And you'd find businesses within the Kenyan coast had to sort of like adopt to this growing demand in order for them to keep their doors open. Now, the MICE tourists and the leisure tourists, their needs and wants are very different. And that has now informed a lot of decisions in the way hotels operate, in the way tour operators operate. For those tour operators who are primarily in the leisure market, you're now seeing that they are curating products that would service the MICE markets and vice versa. So this particular shift has necessitated the Kenyan coast or operators within the Kenyan coast to adjust and adopt so that they can service this market. I know even at a national government level, there has been conversations, and there's actually a plan that is yet to be implemented on actually putting up a convention center, something equivalent to KICC in Mombasa. This again to keep business flowing within the Kenyan coast, even when the so-called leisure business is on a downward trend for whatever reasons. It could be a global threat, it could be the weather seasons and such like. Another shift that we have seen that is now centered around the tourists themselves is, and the Kenyan coast has also gathered a lot of interest from the regional markets. And this has been aggressively pushed by connectivity from some of these markets. I think currently we have two carriers flying direct from their home countries into Mombasa. We have Ethiopian Airline and we have Uganda Airlines. And this has been very critical because you'd find like an airline like Ethiopian Airline, yes, it flies from Addis to Mombasa, but then again, you find that it connects Addis with the rest of the world. So an increase. We have seen numbers from the regional markets going up, and what we've had to experience across all levels, whether it's hospitality, tourism, or travel, that this particular tourist has very peculiar habits. And we have been forced to adjust to some of these habits in order for us to be able to meet their expectations, even at the bare minimum. Now, their peculiar habits are very different from the traditional tourist from our key source markets. These are the European countries. So we, as operators within the Kenyan coast, we have been forced to now adjust to these particular needs of this particular regional tourist, and also go back to the drawing table and see what are the opportunities that lie within these markets that can support business within the Kenyan coast sustainably. Now, why I keep saying sustainably is because traditionally the Kenyan coast used to be known that it is open for business 10 out of 12 months in a year. Why? Because months of, I would maybe say May and June, were known to be quiet months, because our traditional tourists from our traditional markets would then be experiencing summer back in their countries. Whereas the weather here in Kenya is not very beach friendly, for lack of a better word. However, with the effects of global warming and everything in between, with the restrictions that came with COVID, we've also seen a change in trends when it comes to that, because tourists are now traveling any time of the year, because their argument is, and I've had this at a very one-on-one level, is if I don't come in May, Joanne, maybe COVID will happen again and I won't be able to travel for 3 years. So also that has informed a shift even from our traditional source markets, in as at when I can travel, let me travel, because I don't know what's going to happen the next day. We've also seen that there are specific commercial carriers that used to fly directly to Mombasa. Now, these commercial carriers are not charters, so they don't specifically bring us a specific group of tourists, but they bring us a nice mix of tourists from different parts of the world, because they have connectivity in different parts of the world. Now, I would say that for these particular carriers opened up the Kenyan coast to even markets that we potentially would not have considered to invest in when it comes to selling our destination. But for one reason or the other, we found that we are getting small groups from specific countries that even us as Kenya as a destination, we've not really internalized what potentially would work for us in that market when it comes to tourism. And you find that as the numbers keep coming, their needs are also evolving. And you'd find that now we, as the Kenyan coast, in order to grow or sustain those numbers, we've had, as operators within the Kenyan coast, we've had to adjust to some of these requirements. Now, this has forced us to adapt to the way we do things, and even the spontaneity in which some of these tourists come to us, we've had to quickly adjust. I'll give an example of, I had a group of tourists who came in, and they had intentionally planned to spend 7 nights on the Kenyan coast, only for them to come here and they were told that they can actually travel to Tanzania through the Vanga route in Kwale County. And they would need to just take a bus. It will take them a couple of hours. And from there, they can connect by road to different destinations within Tanzania. And they did that actually. So they spent 3 nights in Diani, and they took a bus and they spent 4 nights between Moshi, Arusha, Dar es Salaam, and they flew back home from Dar es Salaam. So some of those, in a typical Kenyan coast traditional tourist would probably have 14 days here in Diani without moving anywhere. But then you find that with the emerging tourists that is now coming to us, some of these things are it's a no-brainer for them. And for us as operators, we have to quickly adjust. Otherwise, if they feel, in fact, they found that connectivity by road to Dar es Salaam, to Vanga, then they crossed over to Tanga through Kwale County. They found that so exciting and so doable in the sense that they didn't need to think of booking a ticket or a flight that takes them to Dar es Salaam direct. In the process between Tanga and Dar es Salaam, they would have done a road trip, and that for them was actually very exciting. So this is the tourists that we are now working with, and that makes us, and with that we need to ask ourselves a lot of hard questions. How are we adjusting to the needs of this kind of tourist? Of course, another trend that we have seen that has grown spontaneously is an increase in domestic tourism here, domestic tourists rather, here in the Kenyan coast. You'd find factors like connectivity through the standard gauge railway SGR have also contributed a lot because it has made travel easier and even more affordable to the Kenyan coast. You'd find even the growth of Airbnbs within the Kenyan coast have also really pushed the numbers within this market, where for those who, for whatever needs or reasons, be it budget or comfort or convenience, opt for this alternative form of accommodation. It has made it very easy for them to book to come down for trips down to the Kenyan coast. And I must also say that there's also been a lot of aggressive initiatives from both the public and the private sector, campaigns from KTB Magical Kenya, like Tembea Kenya, that have really pushed the numbers when it comes to the domestic market. I believe that as at 2023, the number of beds we got from the domestic market actually were higher compared to the number of beds we got from the international market. Now, we must all agree that Michael Joseph once said, Kenyans have very peculiar habits. And I think for us in tourism, and especially here in the Kenyan coast, having come from a traditional tourist to this emerging tourist, we have seen that. We have seen how the purchasing patterns of the domestic tourist, how they make their decisions when it comes to what they are purchasing, the element of shopping. They would shop in 10 different places before they settle for one. And this has also made us rethink how we do business, for lack of a better word. Another trend that has come off when it comes to how we do business in the Kenyan coast is, of course, the gradual change in demographics from the traditional tourist who mainly, especially from the Kenyan coast, comprised of retired individuals who have longer stays but a slightly lower spend per stay. And this tourist now is slowly being replaced by their children and grandchildren, who, yes, we are still getting the numbers from the emerging market, from the traditional source markets, but the type of tourists we are getting now is younger, more energetic. They want more activities. They want cool stuff. They look up everything on the internet. And that informs their decisions. So you'd find for us, even as a destination or as operators within this destination, we have to keep up with what this emerging tourist, whether from the emerging markets or from the traditional markets, is looking for in order for us to remain relevant as a destination and compete with other similar destinations that are within, that would technically more or less offer the products that we have. Another trend that we've seen that is influencing the way we do business is because of the needs of that emerging tourist. We are seeing a shift or a need to want to create, I would say, different products from just the coastal tourism, which is what Judy mentioned, proximity to the beach. So this younger tourist is looking for an experience that will technically make them spend 3/4 of their day outside their room. That's why they would pay for a skydive about $500 and go sleep in a backpackers. And someone would argue if you can afford to pay $500 for an experience, then you can afford a room of even at minimum $50. But no, their argument is we will barely spend time in that room. We want to be outside. We want to do different things. We want to attend parties, festivals. We want to do some of these adrenaline filled activities. So, why am I spending $200 in a room that I will only go shower and maybe sleep for 2, 3 nights? I might as well, even within the same budget of a $200 room and a $500 experience, I might as well spend a larger portion of my money on the experience. So we are seeing a lot of that, and that now has gotten us back to the drawing table to try and see what other experiences can we create outside the traditional rest and recreation experience that our traditional tourists used to do. And something like this is very critical because it informs policy at county level. It informs investments in terms of what can we do here? Is it viable? And can we get people to come and invest in it? So that at least for every trip that an emerging tourist does to the Kenyan coast, they have a different, there's a pool of activities that they can engage in that is different, that would continuously keep feeding that need for them to want to come back. So I think the big question from what is informing some of these trends is, are we ready as an industry to adapt to these shifts? I know one of the biggest challenges that the Kenyan coast has, and maybe this to a certain extent has made it slow down when it comes to the way we do business compared to other destinations that were not as vibrant when we started, is the element of adaptability. How willing are we to adapt to some of these changes? Are we willing to change our business, to review our business models and see how we do business? How are we influencing the people we work with, the team members that we work with at a hotel level, as business owners? How do we have, what conversations are we having so that we can keep our businesses afloat by continuously meeting the demands of this that has been created by these shifting trends? And I think one of the things we constantly need to keep doing, and I think a webinar like this plays a very critical role, is continuous research on this emerging tourist. What are their needs? What do they want? And how can we achieve? If you look at the cycle of a tourist, when they go on holiday, there are those primary needs: a roof over their head, a place to sleep, a good meal, and of course experiences. But even in as much as those are the primary needs for all tourists across all categories, the way they purchase a place to sleep, what to eat, what to do, is informed by the way they were brought up, what they know, how they've been exposed, age, and so many other variables. So then how we need to constantly keep researching to understand what is it that they need, so that we can make sure that our products are relevant and they meet those needs. You might not be able to meet the needs of all the entire demographic, but at least a section that would keep your business up and running, that would keep the destination sustainable, and that would allow us to create employment and retain employment for those who are within the ecosystem here in the Kenyan coast. Another critical thing is capacity building for all stakeholders within the ecosystem to support them in understanding what the emerging traveler and their needs want. I realize even at an investor level that there are certain trends, some of these trends that we keep talking about or we are speaking about today Most people are not privy to this. And before I go to the investors, I would want to even start with even our own teams in our respective setups, whether it's a hotel setup, whether it's a so when they interact with this emerging tourist, they feel that they're different from what they know. And because of that, there is an element of either resistance or they get antagonized. And that, of course, at the end of the day, contributes to the guest experience. Now, some of those issues can be addressed through capacity building, trainings, and I know that certain entities, including government organizations, have been very uh, intentional in wanting to to train or retrain or build capacity for some of these issues. What we are speaking about today is from a guest perspective. It's not technical, it's not where to place a fork and a knife. It is more to do with if we are in business for the next 20 years, what do we need to think about? Who do we need to think about? How do we think this person will behave in the next 10 years? Because that now will inform the products and services that we offer. Product innovation, curate products and experience to meet these needs, of course. Um, you'd find that the tourists who are coming to the Kenyan coast, they want the same thing. They want to go to the beach, so they want to do the marine element. They want to do they want to go see dolphins. They want to do a door cruise at Tamarind, but the way they want to do it is slightly different. It needs that product needs to be tweaked in a way that it speaks their language. Last week, I had about 2 weeks ago, we had a group of a team that came from Nairobi. We were presenting the Tamarind experience to them, telling them that this could be an activity that they can actually do. It's a very unique experience. It is a signature experience here in the Kenyan coast, and this is why it could add value to the entire trip, given the needs that they were looking to achieve from that trip. And one of the which was mandatory, for lack of a better word, is that if they would want, if they are to do the Tamarinda experience, they would want to swap the live band that comes with the experience to a DJ. Because according to them, if they are going to be in the ocean, they would want, quote unquote, a party in the ocean. Yeah, not to be seated, not to be singing ballads, for lack of a better word. They want technically a party in the ocean. And they were even giving us, sharing photos of what they would imagine that experience would be. But luckily, the Tamarind team was very quick to address that particular need. And out of the entire experience of about 5 nights in the Kenyan coast, the Tamarind experience was their best, based on the survey the feedback. So what we are trying to say here is everybody, there are those attractions that bring people to the Kenyan coast, and those become a to-do experience. But you'd find that with every tourist, they would want to do it differently. Yes, the principle is same. We dine on a nice boat in the ocean, but then how we do it is different. We don't want to do it the way we used to do it in the 80s. And now how quickly, that's very important because that will keep the product relevant. Review the business models. For those who are entrepreneurs, especially within the hospitality, travel, and tour operator space, how do we need to interrogate and audit the way we do business and adjust where necessary? If you have no presence online, you are not likely to be within the radar of an emerging tourist, because that emerging tourist, research has shown they spend 70% of their time on a mobile gadget, either laptop, phone, iPad, and space will definitely make you lose out on that particular market. So How quick are you to adjust, and what investments do you need to do to be able to comply? Organization culture. In as much as this particular issue cuts across all organizations across the world, I know because of the nature of the traditional tourist that the Kenyan coast is known for. And even to a certain extent, the training to service that tourist was very geared towards tourists. We have seen a lot of setups have fallen back because the culture in that organization has not been very quick to adapt to what the world needs when it comes to hospitality, travel, and tourism. So you'd find conversations of this is how we've been doing things, we don't want to change. To change is what is the backbone of that organization. And this really compromises the quality and value of what that product has to offer to the emerging tourists. So, what will they do? They'll just move to someone, or they'll move to a destination that they feel that these people are open and receptive to us and our needs. Now, knowledge is involved because people are resistant to things they don't know. But once they are taken through what is going on, this is what is required of us in order for us to remain relevant. Then you find that those pockets of resistance start getting diluted, neutralized, and eventually we are able to adjust to these new needs. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it for now. I I hope that that conversation, or rather my presentation, has triggered a lot of questions. I want to believe that this webinar, in as much as it is us having a conversation around what do we need to do, how do we conform, even for a tour operator who is based in Nairobi, when you're now selling the Kenyan coast, what do you need to think about? What kind of information are you able to share with us? Because I feel the tour operator sits in the heart of the entire ecosystem, or a travel agent. So these are the needs that the domestic market is looking for. You need to be able to challenge us as operators within the Kenyan coast. How do we do this? This is what my group wants. How are you able to adapt to this? What are the implications and things like that? I hope my presentation has been able to share a bit of light and also trigger a lot of questions at both in the different levels in which we operate, whether you're a business owner based who is doing tourism within Kenya and selling the Kenyan coast as part of your destination, whether you work in a hotel setup, whether you are in policy where you support or guide policymakers in what they need to do. And I feel like if we are able to adapt to some of these trends, then of course the Kenyan coast will become a very sustainable destination. My desire is that we are able to do business 12 months in a year as opposed to the traditional 10 months in a year. I think as a destination in Diani, we have been very intentional in trying to push for some of this, to adjust to some of these trends so that we are in business throughout the year. We don't have to send people home 2 months in the year because, quote unquote, it is low season. We are trying to shed off that narrative, and I hope that inspires everyone who operates within the Kenyan coast, whether you're in coastal tourism or marine tourism. How do you adjust to the needs of the emerging tourist based on these trends that we've been able to piece together? Thank you, Judy. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanne, for such an eye-opening presentation. I have made all the notes that I could make. Very, very profound things that you have said. I know you said that you probably had about 8 or so points, but mine have spilled into 11 or 12 because I was able to break down some of them. And I did ask on the chat And I still want you to answer that question on this. What did you find most profound of these trends that Joanne has shared with us today? This is valuable insights and knowledge for all of us, whether we are academics, whether we are tour operators, whether we are students, whether we are a policymaker here, this knowledge is valuable for all of us as we think about blue tourism or coastal tourism or marine tourism. This information is extremely valuable. And Joanne, when you talked about the changes in consumption and talked about rethinking rest and recreation, that operators have been forced to rethink rest and recreation because people don't just want to do things that they used to do the same way that they used to do them before, and they're asking for different. And I thought that was a profound one for me because a lot of us, even in the communication around those who do tourism marketing, I appreciate that we are talking blue tourism, and therefore a coastline must be in the images that we use for communication. But look at this group that you talked about that wanted to party in the ocean. Now, if we are to attract that generation, we are not going to attract them with communication, marketing, communication, and images that are exclusively showing people walking on the beach and holding hands. They want to see an alternative image of having a tamarind experience in the ocean. This is what we were calling marine tourism. Yeah, from beach, combining beach and marine tourism and offering even innovative marine experiences, apart from the cruising and the diving and the surfing, that you can also do alternative things. And so as I listened to you, I say to myself that maybe one of the disservice that we are doing to ourselves today is the narrative, is that whereas the trends are changing, and consumption patterns are changing, the narrative for promoting and marketing the coastal product is not changing as fast. The narrative, the language that is used, the images that are used, and the packages that are sold remain the same. And the trends have changed. The consumer is way ahead of the marketing that we are doing. The consumer is way ahead of the packaging. And if we are going to run after the consumer, then definitely the consumer will have found other places and would have moved away from where we are. So I think you have challenged the policymakers, you have challenged marketers, you have challenged tour operators that the language for communication, the narrative about coastal tourism must begin to change. You also said something profound that related to investment. If we are coastal destinations and our investment portfolio is still asking people to build, I'm not saying they're bad, to build a 300 a bed a hotel, and you have just told us that somebody is willing to spend $500 on an experience and then go and look for accommodation for $50 a night or even less, or $20 a night, because this is actually who this generation of travelers are. So when we start thinking about infrastructure development, we must think about the generation that is traveling as well and how those trends are changing. And exciting that you mentioned the SGR, because SGR made travel affordable, not just for the domestic market, but also for Generation Z, because those who come from Kilifi will tell you that Mtwapa receives the highest number of Gen Z's tourists because, like you say, they want to party and then get a short-term rental, and they can go into that short-term rental, 5 of them, and then go and party the whole night. And whereas they appreciate the space, the way they look at rest is completely different for them. So we must be prepared for both. Yeah, we must be prepared with the coastal product must be prepared for both, that it can take care of those who are looking, of the luxurious rest and recreation, which is associated with retirees, but that we can also have a product that will also attract those the young and the agile. And you mentioned what is it that we need to do, and when you say that we need to constantly review our project, research and development must be on top of what we are doing every day. And then there is the whole idea of alternative and innovative experiences and the spaces. And I just want to give an example of my travels in 2020, 2024. I traveled quite a bit to some of Africa's prime safari destinations, from Zimbabwe to South Africa, Botswana, did Tanzania, and also Kenya, looking at a certain brand and how this brand that is operating in all these countries that I have mentioned, how this brand is promoting sustainable luxury, innovative luxury, yeah, wellness and luxury. And so there was a combination for everyone. And what I found in that this, whereas it was a safari product, the safari product was trying to create space for recreation away from the game drive. And what they have found out is that the game drive is not for the young. They cannot do a game drive in the morning and afternoon and tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow morning before they leave. It doesn't work for them, right? So these lodges are trying to look at spaces, creating spaces where this generation can still appreciate a safari and a game drive, but also have a space to do other things. And I was surprised to find in some of the most high-end luxurious lodges a small tennis court. And I asked, why do you have a tennis court? And they said, you know what? There is now multi-generational travel. And whereas the children, they will go for one game drive in the afternoon, they are definitely not doing 2 morning game drives, but they will do one afternoon. But they want a place where they connect as a family. So if you don't have those spaces for connecting as families, then you lose that kind of a traveler. So thank you so much, Joanne. I will allow us right now to anyone who has, I think Joanne was very detailed, but for anyone who has a question that they would really need Joanne to answer, and it is not on the chat as yet, then we can, Dominic, will you guide us through the questions? But Joanne, thanks a million. I can see everybody is acknowledging that your presentation was very, very informative. And I also want to remind us again, check through the chat. We've got diverse people participating here. You may just find the business partner that you are looking for, the network that you are looking for, the connection that you are looking for. So please go ahead and check what's on the chat and introduce yourself on the chat if you haven't. And Dominic will now guide us in any questions that have been posted on the chat, Dominic, that Joanne could respond to. Do we have any?
Yeah, these are questions that came in earlier when the registrations were ongoing. So
Yes.
Joanne, there was a question that came, and it was asking how has climate change contributed to the shift?
Sorry, Dominic?
The question was asking, how has climate change contributed to the shifts that the shift in the cost of tourism today?
How has climate change contributed to the shifts in the coastal tourism today? Now, what has happened is with the increased awareness, okay, first of all, you need to appreciate that the coastline that I talked about, 600 kilometers, is actually our biggest attraction on this side of town. And the ocean is a very, very fragile ecosystem. In as much as we are able to curate products that are supported by that environment, there's also, to a certain extent, a degree of degradation. Now, what I have observed, and maybe the two operators on this chart can inform this, is that especially for those who are doing marine-based activities, there is a growing concern from those who are participating in that in how sustainable is that activity, or what can they do in a way that, in as much as it is taking something from that ecosystem, there's a way they can, there's a way it is giving back, for lack of a better word. Now, that has also informed a lot of um, conversations within that space on how much more can we continue selling marine-based activity. Now, I'll give you an example of a very simple activity like jet skis on the beach. So anybody coming down to the Kenyan coast, especially of a certain demographic, jet skis are very exciting. It looks so good on your Instagram profile that you are on a jet ski on Africa's leading beach destination. However, these jet skis pollute the ocean. Uh, it is unfortunate that they even cause the death of some endangered species like the sea turtles, where as they are moving about, they would go and chop off their heads and everything. So it's not a very interesting sight to behold. So then I know a number of tour operators who have kicked off jet skis as part of their excursions. They don't do it anymore. They don't sell it as a product. Yes, can you get it from another tour operator? You can, but when they look at what kind of degradation an activity like that does to the ocean and aquamarine life and everything in between, as a way of just aligning themselves to what would be sustainably practical and what would probably keep them in business for the next, I don't know, 40, 50 years, they've taken that product off their price list. Now, in order to supplement that, because they're taking out that, but then what else can they offer? We've seen an increase on land-based activities, especially, and allow me to use Diani as a case study because we are based here. So we've seen even investors bringing in these very fancy motor cars, and they would use that within a specific terrain, but on the land. Do they feed you the same? Do they feed that adrenaline energy that you would get from a jet ski? To a certain extent, yes, it is arguable, but you'd find that that is probably a better alternative, or in as much as it may not be 100% um, friendly, the repercussions of that compared to what we have on this other side is different to a certain extent. So there are small things that you'd find operators are doing within the Kenyan coast that are significant to the state of climate change here in the Kenyan coast. Now, the thing about if you look at environmental sustainability, even from where Kenya sits, a lot of some of these initiatives are not enforced through regulation. So my desire is that we'll get to a point where I know we have all these audits that we do that inform to operators and even our guests that, okay, so we do our business ethically. We are sustainable because we source our food from local farmers. We do all these things. We don't throw waste into the ocean and everything in between. But those audits, from where I sit currently, they are more of setting your product apart, but it is not through regulation. So some people can do it, others prefer not to. I feel like when it gets to a point where now this is entrenched through regulation. For instance, TRA will come to you and they tell you, I will not give you a license, or I will not do this if you do this. Then now we'll see, we can have this webinar again and you will see the drastic change in that shift. But as long as it is what a business stands for, and this is where another element of influence comes in, what a business stands for, as long as it's not entrenched in some form of regulation, then it becomes a choice. I can do it, I cannot, and things like that.
Thank you, Joanne. Dominic, you're picking the questions for us, so you will guide Joanne if there is any other critical question. We've got 13 minutes.
Yeah, I think she has covered everything. Most of the questions that were asked is covered in her presentation. So maybe if there's anyone in the webinar who would like a clarification on anything or has a question, maybe they can raise their hand and that can be tackled.
Okay, so this is the time where you get to ask your questions on the floor. We can allow you to unmute yourself, raise your hand, and then you can, we'll allow you to unmute yourself and ask a question. Just for those who are asking about the link to this today's presentation, you will receive the link. It will be together in our YouTube channel as well. But if you register, you will definitely receive the link via email. It will come to you soon after this webinar. So yes, you will get the link. And someone asked for the Blue Tourism report. Blue tourism in the Western Indian Ocean. We posted the link on the chat. You can find the link to the report on the chat as well. There was a hand up. There was a hand up.
By
Zedric,
Cedric.
Cedric, will you just unmute, introduce yourself and ask your question? Make it brief. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Zedric from Malindi, Ocean Beach. Listening to most discussions about coast as a destination, it's more based in about Mombasa as a town. But you realize there is also towns like Malindi, Watamu, which are normally forgotten in the discussions. If you look at even the charter airlines, it's mostly lobbied to for more charter airlines to Mombasa, yet we also have an international airport in Malindi. So where do we get the balance so that we feel like in the coastal circuit, we are all considered?
I had noted on your questions, and I saw that we were honored to have Mr. Shitaka with us. Mr. Shitaka, if you're still with us, do you want to comment on that question? The chairperson of the Coast Tourism Association, MCTA?
KCTA. Thanks.
ACTA, sorry.
Thanks, Judy. And I think that was a brilliant presentation by Joanne. And I can see
Yes,
so
indeed.
many tourism people in this group. However, I say this: what Joanne was speaking about was about the whole coast. There is a lot of. It wasn't confined to the town. It wasn't confined to
Yani.
Kwale and Yani, because that was a example she was giving because she's there. But it's for the whole coast. I know there are plans to extend finally the Malindi airport because the issues of land have basically been concluded. So yes, and I know that Kilifi wants to be or is pushing itself to be the Riviera of the coast. So there's a lot of emphasis on the full coastal experience, and we must learn from what Joanna said and plan accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope we answered your question. I agree that Joanne's presentation, Zedric, was covering the entire of coast and not just Mombasa. And I hope that Victor has adequately addressed your question. Joanne, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead.
So, sorry, what was your name again, the gentleman?
Zedric?
Zedric.
Yes.
Zedric, yes, my presentation, of course, covered the entire Kenya coast. This is from Lamu, Taita Taveta, actually all the way through to Kwale. Now, I feel like there are certain things that can be done at county level and that would support the bigger tourism agenda. Now, I know and I feel like Kilifi, you are thoroughly blessed. Personally, I feel Kilifi has 3 destinations in one county, whereas some of us in these counties only have 1 or 2 destinations within that. I feel like I would want to throw this challenge to you as a county to sit based on the trends that I've highlighted, and I'm sure there are so many more that are emerging in our different spaces, or rather we are observing from our different spaces, to sit through and see from where you sit as a county, as a tourist destination with 3 different destinations within one county. How have you been able to adapt to these changes? Because some of these answers are what will inform why a charter will land in Malindi and not land in Mombasa. So I would encourage you to engage your stakeholders across the entire ecosystem, and maybe pick a few of these things and ask yourself, how have we adopted? How are we ready? Answer that question that I asked? Are we ready to adopt to some of these trends? Because that initiative has to come from you. If you expect someone to sit in an office in Nairobi and decide that flights will land in Malindi, it has to be a collaborative effort. Yeah, so for me, it's more of a challenge than an answer.
Judy, and I'm very sorry to come in, but if I just may say this, following what
Yeah.
Joanna said, one of the issues about counties is all the counties want to work in silos. Kilifi want to do their thing, sell on Kilifi, Diani, Mombasa, rather than collaborate. You see what she talked about, Kenya and Tanzania. There's also been Kenya and Uganda collaborating and working together. We could have a destination coast and we'd have a lot of people coming in because there's so much to offer. But when we go in as silos, not in fact in Kilifi, in the 3 destinations that Joanna said, they each are competing against one another rather than selling Kilifi as one. So that's where the challenges are. We must work together as one. That's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Victor. I think we are coming to the end of our discussion, and we must remember at the end of it, Joanne, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Judy. I was just going through the chat and I noticed a very integral question that has been asked by my very good friend. Hi, Lucy Macridis. Now, Lucy is
Hi.
hi. How are you?
Thank you, Joanne.
Yes, I think what you raised on the chat is actually a shift, a trend that we have seen. And this not only applies to the Kenyan coast, but generally within the hospitality and travel space. And generally, I would say in all organizations across the world, and especially after COVID. And this has to do with that organization culture and the shift, because we all know change is difficult, change is uncomfortable, and people don't like being uncomfortable. They hate discomfort, but also in the absence of discomfort, there's no growth. So I feel like the Kenyan coast has a special WhatsApp group when it comes to that, because people have been accustomed to doing things in a certain type of way. And I even get my own people at the hotel to tell me, Madam, unajua wale ni wageni wa kisasa. It should not be about wageni wa kisasa. We should be able to create an environment where we influence this change so that someone who's worked in a hotel for 30 years is able to interact with a Gen Z, irrespective of what they think about a Gen Z. And I feel like this now comes from a leadership perspective. It comes from even at HR level, how we build capacity, how we inform or share knowledge about the business environment outside the confines of our hotels, and what that and how that influences the way we do business. That way, you find our teams, our respective team members are able to quickly adjust to what the market needs, and professionally, it is good for them. And even as a business or as an enterprise, you are able to move with the, you are able to remain relevant even in the wake of time. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so much. If I could just jump in there for 2 seconds, Judy. This is Lucy Matridis. Joanne, I couldn't have put it better. And in the saying that the fish rots from the head suggests that everything needs to start from the top, trickling down. So if the organizational structures can be changed, then we are ready to empower or capacity build our members of staff to be ready for this shifting trend. Thank you so much, Judy, and thank you, Joanne, for an amazing, informative session.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. Lucy, if all of you are looking for organizational or personal coach to navigate change, then Lucy is your coach with much experience in the industry to help you navigate change. The changes that are happening are profound. When you talk about employees being of a certain age group and travelers being of a different age group, you really need good services. You really need guidance and mentorship to be able to navigate this space without conflict and without any one of the two feeling like they cannot cope. So I really, I'm not here to sell any service in particular, but Lucy, I acknowledge what you're doing for the industry. You're doing an amazing job in that particular space. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have, we will, yeah, most welcome. We will not have had a better conversation than this, and it's all been made possible by all of you being here, remaining connected. I think this was a very, very interesting conversations. Joanne, you've kept everyone locked in from the beginning. No one is leaving. In fact, more people are joining in. Congratulations for being a very excellent presenter with much clarity. And for anyone who is looking for way forward, if you live here and go to your organization today and say, I attended this webinar, and say to your organization, here are 5 things we could start working on. We could start looking at our business model. We could start looking at our organizational structure. We could go into product innovation and review our product. We must look at ways in which we build our knowledge. You can live here and go and say, hey, there's so much happening out there. We can't just sit here and do things the way we used to do them. We must look for those spaces and continuously engage so that we know what is going on. And we must invest in this knowledge as well, because that is where the disconnect happens. There are a lot of us who think that we don't need to invest in this. You have invested your time today to come here. Yeah. So you can always invest. I always say there are 3 things that you invest here. You can invest your time, you can invest your talent, like Joanne has invested her knowledge and skills today, or you can also invest your treasures where you actually pay for the services. Those are the 3 ways in which you invest in yourself or in your organization for growth. So you have been given, you have been given a package by Joanne saying, yes, there are these things that are changing and we are being left behind. For us not to be left behind and for us to grow coastal tourism responsibly and for it to remain the economic force powerhouse that it is, with employing, I think the employment numbers that we talk about in tourism in Kenya, which is about 4 million. Victor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a large percentage of that comes from coastal employment. Today, we are not talking about the type of employment, whether it's seasonal or full-time, but the coastal tourism on marine and blue tourism in general contributes to a much higher employment than the rest of the tourism industry. So how do we wake up this mighty horse and get it going. Ask these questions that Joanne has left us with in your organization. Build your capacity to understand what is going on, to innovate your product, review your business models, invest in continuous research as well, so that together as a country, we can confidently say in a year or two or in the next 5 years, or let me use a global calendar mark, that before 2030, which is the year for accountability on sustainability, that come 2030, coastal tourism in Kenya, blue tourism will stand up and say, we are responsible, we are resilient, and we are thriving together with our communities. Thank you very much for being here. I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar next month. Please look out for the next webinar. We always announce it at least 2 weeks before the webinar. It's a monthly series, and it's just a platform where we are asking experts to come in, or professionals to come in and just share knowledge on where the industry is going. If there's a specific topic that is of interest to you and you'd like us to cover in our webinars, you can send us via email, or even you can share it in the chat. Just through the links, we have your contacts. Just communicate with us and we will see what it is that everyone is looking for, and we are here to serve you. So thank you very much for being here, everyone. We'll let you proceed with the rest of the agenda of the day. But remember, the coast needs new narratives and it needs alternative experiences and products. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a brilliant day. See you at the next webinar. Dominic, is there anything you want to add?
Not at
The
the moment.
coordinators.
So much, everyone.
Okay. Right. But Dominic, I will add on your behalf. I see you have posted. We are going to Diani, South Coast, Kwale County, for the 10th celebration of the Sustainable Tourism Africa Summit, which is going to be on the 8th and the 9th of May. And I call it an intimate summit. If you just want your mind to be blown away with what has been happening in this space of sustainable tourism in the last 10 years and accountability towards 2030, the next 5 years, what is critical for us, then please join us in Diani on 8th and 9th of May. Dominic posted the link on the chat. Thank you for being here again. We are Sustainable Travel and Tourism Africa. Take care and be responsible. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I think Dominic, did you want to take some screenshots? But I think a number of people have left already.
I think we can.
If you can put on your video, fine. For those of you who can put on their videos, super cool. We can take 1 or 2 before the rest of us check out. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've also posted the link for the registration of the summit in the chat box. So please register.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This was fantastic having you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Judy. Bye.
I look forward to see all of you. See all of you next time. In Diani, of course, they must come and see what you have spoken about,
yes.
Joanne.
Yes.
Yes.
For ease of the guy who's in Malindi, in the coast, not in Diani, at the coast.